Tiffany Hughes and the Wicked Witch of Ash Mountain Part 1. Disclaimer. This is a work of fiction. Names, characters, businesses, places, events and incidents are either the products of the author's imagination or used in a fictitious manner. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, or actual events is purely coincidental. Chapter 1. Tiffany meets Charles Vomere. A long time ago, as it was said, a medieval legend and a story lost in the mist of time, in the kingdom of South Wales lived a teenage girl known as Tiffany Hughes. This is her story and her many exciting adventures. She resides in a small rural village and through no fault of her own, but rather an unfortunate set of circumstances, now lives alone in a stone cottage. She affectionately loves her pets and wakes up each morning and goes about her usual chores, gets dressed, combs her hair, and makes her way downstairs to have breakfast. Tiffany loves eating oats with full cream milk and looks out the window to a lovely spring day. After breakfast she goes out and basks in the morning sun and looks over her backyard. It is a beautiful English garden full of flowers and ferns. There is a lovely pond. This pond is frequented by her duck she calls Daryl. In fact, she likes to call out to every one of her pets. They all have names. "Good morning, Daryl," she says, as it splashes in the water. "How are you today?" The duck flies off into the distance. She walks over to the large barn next to the house. In there are her other pets. She has pigeons, a dove, geese and her pet dogs, one of whom was called Winston. She throws the ball to Winston and he runs to grab it and takes it back to her. "Good dog," says Tiffany. She looks into his big hound eyes. "How about we go for a walk in the park on our way to town?" Tiffany enjoys walking in the park. So having completed all the early morning chores, she walks down the little country lane and through the park to the town center. She stops at the bakery and ties Winston's leash up around the doorknob as usual. "Good morning," Tiffany says to the baker. "How are you today?" "I was up at 4 in the morning baking this lovely bread," says the baker. Tiffany picks up a loaf of freshly baked bread, smells it and says with delight, "It smells delicious. I can't wait to get home and eat some of this bread with honey on it." "No worries," said the baker. "Have a nice day." So Tiffany and Winston go back home along the park and enjoy the warmth of the spring day. Tiffany arrives home and enjoys the crusty fresh bread with a golden syrupy honey dripping onto the bread as she eats a large mouthful. There is Winston and her rabbit for companionship at the kitchen table. She notices a small mouse that comes out occasionally through a small crack in the wall to eat some of the bread crumbs that fall to the ground. Tiffany laughs, as she does not see the mouse as a problem and loves the company of all her pets. So Tiffany goes about her business in typical daily fashion, unaware that her pets can communicate to each other in their own special way. The animals were more aware of their surroundings and the subtle changes that were going on in their immediate vicinity. One day when Tiffany was walking through the park again, with Winston, her pet dog, he was a beautiful hound with golden hair that shone in the sun. As he fetched the stick that was thrown to him by Tiffany, she notices in the corner of her eyes. The trees looked rather menacing. They were swaying in an unusual manner, as if they were following Tiffany's every movement, and she felt uncomfortable about it, but did not take too much notice of this at the time, as it was only a tree, she thought. The next day the spring sunshine seemed to fade away behind the clouds, and it became progressively darker. Tiffany went about her daily chores and fed her animals as usual, but they were not themselves. Their demeanor had changed. She went down to pat Winston when she saw in the distance a man dressed rather shabbily, with a long jacket. His pockets were full and bulging at the seams, and shoes that looked as if they had walked 100 miles. He was walking towards her. She looked at him for a while and noted his unshaven face and long red hair. He finally was in her presence and stopped. He bent down and patted Winston, looked up at Tiffany with a twinkle in his eye, smiled and said, "Nice dog you have, young lady." Tiffany smiled back, the man now clutching his stomach and looking out of breath, as he replied to her, "I've been wandering for days looking for the evil one who lives up in the mountains." Tiffany, looking at Charles, feeling puzzled by his remarks, said, "The evil one? Who are you?" The disheveled man stood up and looked down at her and said in a commanding tone, "Some might call me a wanderer, but my name is Charles Vomir, young lady, but most know me as Charles the Chunder Man." He was laughing to himself as he spoke. Tiffany, scratching her head looking puzzled, didn't know whether to laugh too and wondered, "Why is this man so strange?" she thought. He continued, "I come from a town about 30 miles away. When I was a young man I suffered greatly with my stomach pains, and my parents took me to many doctors for treatment, who diagnosed that my stomach juices were quite unusual for a lad of my age, and concluded that I had a virtual chemistry lab inside my stomach, as it contained many different compounds and processing facilities. At first I was shocked that I was so different from my peers. Whenever I swallowed something I threw up. It was quite embarrassing, as it happened at the most inappropriate times. When I went to school, I decided that with my education, I would study chemistry to learn more about my health condition. I experimented in the lab and found the different chemical combinations that gave me powers of regurgitation that I could use to my advantage. Which brings me to my purpose of what I am doing here. One day I woke up and walking towards my village with my assistant Jane, and saw before me a fire-breathing dragon. I was shocked and said out loud, "This could not be real, dragons, they don't exist." But it was real and menacing, as it swooped towards me, and was about to roast me alive with its fiery breath. I looked around at my surrounds, and could only grab the herbs that were in my knapsack. I ate juniper and other herbs and regurgitated a ball, and with all my might threw it inside up in the mouth of the approaching dragon, which neutralized its fiery breath momentarily. Then, with the assistance of Jane, I stabbed the dragon until it died and extracted its fiery red eyes from its skull as souvenirs. I learned where it had come from, as I also could now understand what the animals were saying to me. They were worried and they said, "Can you help us? As in the trees we hear an evil force wants to kill you, as you are a threat to an evil one." I was worried and determined that I must confront this evil force, so here I am on my journey to confront the evil being. Tiffany at that stage took pity on Charles the wandering man, and was rather curious with his story, even though she did not completely believe him and the tales he had just told her. But her intuition made her rather curious to find out more about this man. She then said abruptly in a caring voice, "Charles, you look very tired. Have a rest here, and my name is Tiffany. You can sleep in the barn with the animals and continue on your way tomorrow morning." He hesitated for a while, but nodded acknowledgingly, and went to the barn and sat down on the stool and table inside there. Charles said, "Thank you, Tiffany, you are most kind. How can I ever repay you for your act of goodwill?" Tiffany smiled. "It's nothing really." Charles took out of his pocket a red ball and put it in Tiffany's hands. "I want you to have this. It is one of the dragon's eyes that I slain recently. It will give you powers to listen and understand the animals and trees around you as they whisper and talk." Tiffany looked at this deep ruby red eye and did not know whether to accept it. She hesitated and tried to hand it back to Charles. He closed her hand and said firmly, "Keep it, for it will serve you well. I have the other dragon's eye." So she too sat at the table and Charles continued with his story. The evening approached and there were storm clouds in the distance. A strong wind blew, then the rain started pelting. Huge raindrops fell on the ground and surrounds. As I said, I killed the dragon. I had a close encounter. It was there to get rid of me, as I was a threat to this evil force that I know I will confront in due course. I did not know at the time the powers associated with this object, but with this dragon's eye around my neck it all became clear to me. Tiffany noticed all her pets had come around and sat on the hay and watched eagerly as Charles continued with his story. There was Winston the hound, Rusker the cat, Chinny the pigeon, Daryl the duck and Narkar the rooster and Molly the hamster. Tiffany then said with interest, "Why did the dragon attack you? How did it know you were a threat?" Charles smiled and said, "Because I was being watched by the trees and the bushes and the word got back to this evil one that lives up in the mountains, of my special situation, that I was no ordinary mortal. I had the ability to create defenses that this evil one now sees me as a threat." Tiffany then laughed. "How can trees listen and talk to one another?" Charles then said in a low voice, "I did not believe it myself at first, but when I started talking to the animals they told me what the wicked one was up to." Tiffany nodded and Charles continued, "There is a wicked spell throughout the land. All the evil was focused up in the mountains over there." Charles pointed east and said, "There is a spell on the trees. From my observation it appears the source of this spell came from the ash that has fallen on the trees, its source being from a long distance away, when the ash was strewn into the sky, and with the rain it lodged itself on the trees. The leaves and the branches, it did not matter what variety of tree it was, they were all susceptible to this wicked curse. I suspect it has given this evil force the ability to arouse the native trees to listen, and watch and report back like a huge network throughout the land. The animals, which are much closer to nature, knew this and told me so." Tiffany then noticed that her pets were all nodding with Charles as if in agreement. She said amazed, "This must be a trick of yours. I can't believe what I'm seeing with my eyes." Charles replied quickly, "This is no trick, you can talk to them yourself, put the dragon's eye around your neck and you will communicate to them as I have done." Tiffany put her hand in her pocket and reluctantly put the dragon's eye around her neck, and her eyes widened as she looked over the animals and noticed that they were talking to each other. Winston said, "It's true what the man says. I've heard the same from my friends over the hills. The trees watch and listen, and we are in great danger." Tiffany then quickly removed the dragon's eye from her neck and the animals did not talk. She looked at Charles, now believing his story. It's true, and felt the horror of what was to become of them. She then said to Charles, "I must come with you to help you defeat the evil one." Charles said, "No, it's too dangerous, the evil force that awaits me. I fear that it will destroy us both. I must act alone, it is for your safety." Tiffany puts on the dragon eye necklace again, and said to Charles, "My pets will come too, we will all help you." The animals all cheered and Charles reluctantly remarked, "Okay, remember we will be fighting a great evil." The night lingered and the storm continued with the rain. Charles and Tiffany both fell asleep. The next morning the storm had passed and they looked outside. All seemed quiet, but there was a darkness in the trees. Usually rain washes everything clean, but it looked dirty, as if there had been a dust storm. Charles said, "This is the work of the evil one, and we will find the source of this wickedness that has engulfed this hamlet and surrounds. As well we must be careful, as we are being watched." He put on his knapsack and went outside and spoke to the animals. They ran off in all directions. Tiffany said, "What's going on?" Charles replied, "We're going on a long and dangerous journey. We must be prepared for all eventualities. The animals are looking for items that will be useful if I should need us to defend ourselves." Charles found some mint and rosemary growing in Tiffany's beautiful garden. He swallowed it with some water, and then a strange sound came from his stomach, and he spewed up into the air. A green liquid shower came down, in which he washed himself, and was he smelling fresh and clean. Combed his hair, looked in the mirror and said happily, "Now don't I look a picture of elegance?" Tiffany was impressed. He said, "Are you hungry?" She replied, "I've only got eggs and honey, haven't had the time to buy the bread, there's only flour in the kitchen." Charles mixed the flour and water, swallowed it, and ate some hot coals from the fire that kept them warm overnight. He then spewed a large blob. It solidified and looked like freshly baked bread. He said to Tiffany, "Go on, it's okay to eat." She sliced the loaf and ate it with honey. It was a delicious breakfast.